Minato Namikaze, the 4th Hokage, is one way or another one of the most feared shinobi to ever live, with him striking fear into shinobi of all nations as a Jonin, according to the 1 Decade 100 Ninja Guide, with him also gaining a literal run-on-site order for the entire country of Iwagakure due to his proficiency with the Flying Thunder God and ruthless battlefield nature, granting him with the title of the Yellow Flash. However, with such fear established to the world, what if we took Minato, whilst stronger and Hokage, and placed him against each of these shinobi villages to see if he could conquer the entire nation and village at once, including their Biju, Kages, Jonins, all of those respectively. However, before delving into our first match, I believe an initial section of Minato's power should be necessary to demonstrate how strong he should be entering each village, and while this shouldn't come to a surprise to really anyone, as Minato states to Kushina, he's the Hokage, he won't go down easily, which is something that's already befitting, as Hiruzen, whilst much older into his life, is considered to stand at not only the peak of Konoha, but the world due to being Hokage, which is also just a reputation that stands at the peak of the shinobi world according to Kabuto, although Hiruzen lives up to this very reputation as implied by the bystanding Anbu members watching his battle with Orochimaru. However, with half as many wrinkles and power that was confident in taking on the full Nine Tails, Hiruzen relinquished his title of Hokage and giving it to Minato. Although Hiruzen is noted in the back of the 1 Decade 100 Ninja Guide to be one of the most loved figures in all of Konoha of all time, which would also be coupled with his ability to maintain stability for an extremely long period of time, and the relinquishment of this title wouldn't have been out of the public view of him not being very strong or strong enough to protect him, as he obviously still was nearly a decade and a half later, and it's simply that Minato was much stronger and faster than old Hiruzen, hence to why he was given the title that requires one to be the strongest ninja in the village, which would also fit with how Hiruzen not only concedes much later in his life that Minato could take down a threat that he likely couldn't, but he also relies on Minato very heavily through the Nine Tails attack, likely due to how, while yes, Hiruzen was confident in subduing the full Nine Tails, as stated to his Anbu guard, Minato was much better suited for the job, as confirmed through his ability to blitz Kurama around constantly through their fight, such as when saving Kushina, outspeeding Kurama's combat speed, which would align with how Minato had to outspeed Kurama to get onto his head and drop Gamabunta, which he did with Body Flicker, with, even the most impressive of these feats being when Minato is shown to react to a full Nine Tails Biju Bomb, which is shot at such a force it was actually destroying the houses around it due to the projectile velocity, which is something that also happens with the Susanoo Arrow, for example, which is nearly a blitz level above Sasuke's own combat speed, and considering how the Biju Bomb and Susanoo Arrow are actually relative in Naruto Sasuke's case, you could seriously imagine why the Biju Bomb, the ultimate Biju technique, is much faster than Kurama's combat speed, which Minato still reacted to through cracking open space and time through his Flying Thunder God Guiding Thunder, which was a move Minato prepared to do several other times, as implied when he states, "With this much power, I've got to be careful where I redirect my attacks," which is plural, implying more in a cautionary aspect and a planned aspect to the transportation itself. And what makes this so utterly impressive, although more consistent, would be due to how the full Nine Tails is sheer chakra, with hatred that's festered for hundreds of years, allowing for far more powerful chakra, which is coupled with his already ridiculous intellect. Like, okay guys, Kurama knows nuclear fusion off his head, so he's not like the other wandering Biju, but is actually a super unit because of his proficiency in dealing with such power and chakra that would be greater than the KCM2 Naruto's Kurama avatar, which is also just chakra, which is likely consistent for Minato to scale to, as Kakashi literally thinks Naruto and Minato are the same character, with being the very same Kakashi going on to battle Rinnegan Obito, a character who could battle relatively to KCM2 Naruto, but would be actually shown combo attacking with one of the most fatigued versions of Minato ever against Zetsu, who calls their attacks persistent after they exit smoke clouds, implying combinations and a battle ensued. And when discussing Minato's stamina and abilities, this would be another primary factor for this battle in battling an entire village. However, against the Iwa Jonin in the war, Minato lays out like 70 kunai and tells his platoon to throw them all for him to teleport to, implying that he teleported to either all or most of them. And then with Minato training and getting stronger whilst Hokage, plus gaining like weight and height, therefore more chakra, Minato then gets brought back with a Kurama cloak, and despite this, Minato gets so much chakra drain in the war, he can't even use the FTG once, where he then gives so much more of his cloak that it's actually displayed, leaving him in a weakened Edo body with a missing arm, and he still can perform one-handed signs, instant Rasengan, Sage Mode, and combo attacks with War Kakashi, again a KCM2 level fighter. But what would you expect? Minato is the fastest of the first 4 Hokage, who as a unit are called the strongest soldiers or the biggest of the big fish, meaning that Minato is the fastest of a unit beyond KCM2 Naruto, with Tobirama, potentially the fastest of the others, concedes that Minato's body flicker in base is beyond his own, with him also saying that Minato is quick at striking too, placing a conjunction and connection between those two speeds, making Minato obviously way faster than Tobirama, who was the fastest of his era through either the Warring States period or the FTG, which is an ability Minato also honed far beyond what Tobirama ever could, which is another reason as to why Minato would be faster, as the second databook notes how it works with it being a space in which you move, which fits with how Minato never once calls it teleportation, but rather transportation through the entire Obito fight. So obviously 2 + 2 = 4, Minato's better at a speed-based technique, Minato is faster. And I mean, bro, we all know dude's a speed demon, but I suppose that's why he's so deadly, is because of his speed to actually capitalize on his strength and arsenal that he's actually stated to have in the chapter 238 synopsis statement that actually states he has unrivaled strength, which would include characters like Hiruzen, Jiraiya, Itachi, Orochimaru, which fits really well with his lore for the Raikage, which we can discuss later in that section. But I also mentioned earlier that Minato can perform one-handed signs while stupidly fatigued, which is an ability so rare and telling for his power that Kakashi, Konoha's strongest Jonin, never saw anything like it prior to Haku, which shows how ridiculous Minato is, and coupling with his ridiculous speed, intellect, strength, stamina, and ability to crowd control better than nearly anyone in the series through the FTG, and its variants like the Flash Out Dance or the Guiding Thunder, respectively, it should be quite clear why this battle is not only fair, but a battle that Minato should enter into a good footing on. And with that, just before our first village, I would like to ask you guys if you guys would consider, liking the video or subscribing, as it does help your friendly neighborhood virtue by quite a bit. So by all means, hit the sub or check out something else from my page. But anyway, let's go ahead and jump into our first match, which is actually going to be a bonus round, being against the 6 Paths of Pain and the Rain Village. Now, firstly, while all the other villages have Bijuu, Amegakure doesn't, but I suppose it doesn't really matter considering the third databook makes explicit note that each member of the Akatsuki, so not even Pain, who's stated to be the strongest man in the Akatsuki, are stated to be capable of taking on Bijuu, Jinchuriki, and 1,000 men at once. But when questioning why would they follow Pain though, the databook simply says because of his charisma and power that no one can deny, which is applying 2 traits about Pain for as to why they follow him, and they state charisma and power, although power gets a quality applied to it, being that which no one can deny, which fits with his other third databook statement that states the invincible leader of the Akatsuki, even the notoriously strong members obey him, which applies 2 similar traits, strong to the members and invincible to Pain, which fits really well with his other really impressive standings lore-wise, which is why I actually think Pain comes in as the strongest of any of the leaders within this video, certainly, although he doesn't really have the backup within the village other than like Conan, but I mean, bro, like what? One thing Pain does have to his advantage, it would be not only his knowledge advantage, but just his Rainmaker Jutsu, which allows for Pain to sense every single drop of rain in the village, which he could use for detecting Minato and where he teleports and things along those lines, which I could see him also trying to combat through just trying to overwhelm Minato through several things like autonomous animal pass summons, including ones like the crab, dog, centipede, rhino, ox, panda, bird, chameleon, and the one other that Pain actually never uses in the manga, and that none of you guys likely know about, as I just recently found it. However, essentially, throughout the war, Kishimoto put blueprint sketches of ideas and characters he liked, but never really introduced. He also does this back in, the Land of Waves about, panels he used against in the Haku fight, but whatever. And one of the characters he actually introduced was this giant creature here, who has not only visible foreign black metal piercings, but it outright states Moira, summoned by these 6 Paths of Pain, also called Destroyer, due to its strength rivaling or being comparable to a tailed beast. It's currently sealed by the 6 Paths of Pain. and the kanji and translation will all be on screen, showing that while this wasn't used, Pain didn't really need to, but it is still an option. It would be certainly the greatest of all of his pressure abilities, which he could also be able to couple with his abilities like the Shenra Tensei and Bansho Tenin, and to kind of flow out marked kunai out of their thrown locations, which could counteract some of Minato's plans, albeit briefly, considering like how against the Iwanin and Obito, and as implied by B when talking to Naruto, Minato does use Body Flicker as an opening move, in which he could place markings like in the aforementioned Iwanin case, allowing for Minato to teleport to basically any path of his choosing at any time that he does choose to win. Then he can just like slam him with a Rasengan or stab him with a kunai, or just basically whatever he chooses, seeing as Minato is certainly stronger than Pain, as implied by himself when explaining to Naruto that despite the fact he watched the entire Pain fight, he's likely not as strong as the Masked Man, and that he's likely the one pulling the strings, and that Naruto is going to need to master the Nine Tails and gain some extraordinary power to beat the man that he already did, furthering Minato's KCM2 level scaling. But hey, I digress. Firstly, before discussing Minato versus Obito, I want to preface that it's likely one of the most misunderstood fights in the series within how people tend to view Minato's performance, which is extremely impressive, even without the Obito fight, where he actually, would enter in very fatigued after battling the Nine Tails in the way he did, on top of him holding and augmenting Kurama's seal for either 12 to 18 hours of delivery time, as generally expected for first-time mothers, hence to why Minato is sweating when we first see him appear, where he then blitzes Obito and took their first interaction and opened it with Body Flicker, which is something that Obito planned on, hence to why he placed bombs on baby Naruto, which still failed, allowing for Minato to then escape, where he would deal with Kurama on top of the Hokage Rock, with Obito staring at him from the streets below, where he then tried to teleport behind Minato and catch him off guard, to where when Minato likely slows his motion down, Obito catches his hand, but he was faster than Obito's Kamui, teleporting away, although Obito, to give him some credit, he does state that he'll take him in quicker next time, although when he was trying harder, Minato was still able to test his speed and ability to transfer, whilst also convincing Obito of a consistent pace, before then going to run again, but this time stating, "It'll be over for one of us in an instant," which, no, does not imply directly that Minato thought he could lose. It just seems to be more of a concession of his lack of knowledge of Kamui, but he was successful in blitzing behind him and slamming him with his Rasengan into Obito's back, hitting him so hard that his non-Zetsu arm literally melted off, and considering this was a threat greater than all the Pains at full power through their showings against Konoha, it's pretty clear how Minato would then fare against them, especially with abilities like the Flash Hal Dance, that is Minato marking or making a clone to toss out 6 marked kunai for rapid fire attacks on groups. That's unironically the same number as Pain's paths, and considering how Minato does scale above characters like KCM2 Naruto and the other Hokage and things like that, it should be clear how badly Minato would be blitzing Pain, and why saying that if each path focused on one, they still might not even be able to react, making this match heavily favoring Minato, although his style of fighting, which he could also be aided by his ninjutsu, as he does have multiple nature releases at his disposal, along with toad summons like Gamabunta, who would be the strongest of all toad summons, hence to why he could fight with Shukaku. And I mean, even like the small ones like Gamma can take Kisame's like Samehada Sword Strike, so I mean, the toad summons are pretty busted, coupled with the blitz levels of speed and AP unrivaled in this past era. It's pretty clear of a win for Minato, and there isn't really any notable Amegakure shinobi outside of Hanzo, who Pain killed, so yeah, Minato wins like 8 out of 10 times. Following the Rain Village, we have our first of the 5 great nations, and another one to stand at a really solid chance of beating Minato, and likely much better than Pain did, seeing as while they have Inoki, the strongest Kage, they also have Han and Roshi, who are 2 Jinchuriki capable of utilizing Biju bombs, and let's put some respect on these two real quick. Like, okay, Roshi's actually pretty powerful and has some overall interesting designs with his Biju, Son Goku, who is based off of, yeah, you guessed it, Goku from Dragon Ball, with the rings on his head being based off Chinese legends Son Goku, according to the official Naruto art book, which also states some basic stuff for Han's design, along with him just using steam-based techniques, as we see in the Boy release, which did boost Naruto's power quite a bit against Kaguya and whatnot, with Roshi's lava style also being no joke, being like burning like KCM1 Naruto in the war, with Han also being like noted to be someone with like the top level taijutsu in the world. However, their most notable piece of information is from their battle against Minato when he he was either 12 or 15, depending on how you calculate his age, where you then can see Han and Roshi engage in a pseudo-avatar, which is supposed to only be done through perfect Jinchuriki, making this a retcon. Or so some people think. But the word perfect Jinchuriki isn't a real term, but rather a fan-ascribed term to those to better communicate when talking to each other, and it's kind of just describing those who have a complete control and synergy between them and their Bijuu, with the two most notable mentions being Bee and Yagura, and then obviously Naruto. However, the other Jinchuriki like Yugito have extremely similar statements, remarking very similar to like Bee and Yagura, so it could be very plausible that Han and Roshi were in great control of their Bijuu. Even so, in a way that I've articulated before, it could just be possible based on how their seals actually function. And what I mean is, when Kushina begins to have Kurama extracted, she enters into a very similar state of a pseudo-avatar roar, only due to how her tetragram was weakened, and since we know the tetragram is more solid than even Bee's steel shell seal, it could be better at suppression, so potentially other seals could allow for some chakra to come out, more so than in Kurama's case, allowing for Han and Roshi to utilize it. But anyway, I digress. I just wanted to point out that they can indeed use Bijuu bombs, and this has explanations, and more importantly, while there is 2 of them, they aren't enough to overwhelm Minato, especially in their full states, as they would have to limit their power significantly to prevent destruction of Iwa, like with the Onoki, who can be threatening to, he just can't be threatening to nation wipe like he was against Turtle Island, or else this would just count as like a fail. However, unlike Han and Roshi, whose only real chance would be doing something like that, Onoki, not so much. The reason being is Onoki is a case like Minato, where his speed is just so dangerous because of his abilities, with Onoki obviously having the particle style, which would be most certainly useful in flying up in the air, making manual ground kunai nearly useless, along with his ability to just evaporate the kunais, which helps in putting Minato at a disadvantage. And while Onoki can be really fast, like potentially a blitz level above the version 2 Raikage, if you take his absurd feats of reacting to a light and V2 Raikage to weigh him down, but I wouldn't fully place my bets on that, as Onoki by that point has clearly been mental amped through his will being renewed, hence to why he has much better feats, and why, like Deidara for example, does state that Onoki is even faster than in his prime, which is pretty crazy. Now you could still put some stock into it being like, or at least into him being close to a version 2 Raikage, maybe potentially a little above if you get him some higher ends, but that doesn't really place him faster than Minato or anything, just capable of reacting to him on some low ends and whatnot, which is pretty telling with his advantages going into this. And it leads us to, can Minato weave around the particle style 9 times, as that's how many he uses against Lord Mu before getting gassed out, meaning it would be less here. So he could he get around those? Probably. I doubt if any of them would really be pulled off faster than he could think, but just they kind of certainly give him trouble in terms of just applying pressure on top of the 2 Jinchuriki and the other Iwa Jonin, like Akatsuchi, who would probably be much younger, and even Kitsuchi, who could be more in his prime. However, those 2 are pretty basically, they're just mud merchants, which is a set of techniques Onoki can also use with how he can like cover his hand to smash Gengetsu's clam, but this can also just destroy Onoki's back, which again prevents him from playing a battle of attrition, when Minato certainly could engage that type of fight. And another thing that's interesting that Minato can actually do to circumvent the particle style is if it's fired in long beams, then he could just use Guiding Thunder on it and send it into a subspace, and making it useless, making that fight alone favor Minato. And with again techniques like the Flash Hao dance and just his overall ability to navigate multiple opponents on the battlefield, like with A and B for example, Minato should have an advantage, as it's not really like Kitsuchi is anything crazy. And while some people might cite him holding the Gedo Mazo, it's more so the other way around, with the Gedo Mazo's arms being fully extended, meaning that the giant boulders weren't doing much, and the large-scale jutsu that's not explosive is virtually useless against Minato due to the FTG, which is why I reiterated at the beginning, it's just really disadvantageous for Han and Roshi and Inoki to have to fight in Iwagakure, meaning that Minato should beat Iwagakure 7 out of 10 times, and I mean they did have a run on side order for this guy. After Iwa, we have probably the quickest, because I mean, bro, it's Kitaigakure, the village hidden in the mist with the worst overall military might, with their only real force being Mei, arguably the weakest of the 5 Kage, as discussed in our last match, with her lava style and large-scale water style. It's impressive, but easily evadable through either body flicker or the FTG, and when you couple this with the Sobu, once being sealed in Minato's student Rin, meaning he might actually just have knowledge on him and his abilities, then it's basically cooked for Kitty. And what I mean is, like, would Ao and Chodoro realistically add much here? Like, be for real. Yeah, that's what I thought. So, meaning it's only really up to Mei, and her style is so badly antithetical to Minato's, it's pretty tragic. And while I almost always try to give Mei the benefit of the doubt, this is just one of those you simply can't do that, and it's pretty clear in a stomp for Minato's favor, which nobody would really disagree with. So, you know, let's keep it moving, as Minato should come out on top like 10 out of 10 times. Following up with Kumo Gakure, and probably the most anticipated match for Minato being against his notorious rival, the 4th Hokage. However, this rivalry probably isn't what it appears to be among the consensus of fans. Minato is, and has always been shown to be, clearly above the Raikage, whether that be through the aforementioned Chapter 238 synopsis statement of him having unrivaled strength, or just the 543 synopsis statement that notes that the 4th is even faster than Raikage, which is something A practically concedes to, and him saying that no shinobi alive is faster than him now that the 4th Hokage is gone, implying he was faster there during their time together, which is also probably why A believes there wasn't a finer shinobi to ever live. The 4th databook also makes note for the version 2 Raikage that he can overtake even Naruto in his KCM1 cloak, and that he boasts a godlike speed not inferior to the Yellow Flash, whereas Minato's 4th databook page states that he was praised among all ninja as the greatest in godlike speed, making Minato faster than the version 2 Raikage, who was either equal to or greater than the Yellow Flash or Jonin Minato, which is also consistent with how both V2A and more notably KCM1 Naruto are compared to Jonin Minato, where it's only once he obtains KCM2 that Naruto surpasses Minato whilst Hokage. And I mean, Minato in the manga does massively better against A and B than in the anime, as in the anime when dodging A, Minato flips a kunai behind his back and above A's head, where he then teleports to a pre-placed kunai on a tree, whereas in the manga, he throws the kunai to the tree and teleports likely from when the cloak touches his face to when the fist is about to, showing how much faster Minato truly is. And while some might cite B perception blitzing Minato, this is incredibly stupid, and Minato just absolutely blitzed A terribly, and we know that he's holding back, so him not going full speed on this stab shouldn't be outlandish, as we know he held back any jutsu like the Rasengan, for example. But also, he just reacts to the tentacle and places a marker, so there isn't really a valid way to assert the Raikage, or hence B, above Minato, whether Jonin or Kage. Ranking alongside Iwagakure though, I would lean towards Kumo Gakure being the best equipped village, as their Jonin are also very formidable in those like Darwin C, who could battle an early Kage Summit Sasuke through water style and surprise lightning style with Genjutsus, Omoi who could fight Sasori and Deidara, Lord Dodai who's actually called Lord, and can also battle the revived 3rd Raikage, and most notably Killer B, who could beat Taka Sasuke and Kisame. So, as you could see, there are many notable Jonin, which could offer more help than anything you'd expect from Ao, Chodoro, or like the Kitsuchi, for example. And while most of these Jonin can't stack up to Minato, they could be used as better cannon fodder, if you will, to help protect the village, while Minato will probably be getting tag teamed by B and A the entire time, which should just end just as bad as their old encounters, with Minato growing far stronger in power since those Jonin days, such as how Minato is implied to have a distinction in the 4th databook from earlier, but the 2nd databook as well actually states that he utilized the command ability that he fostered in battle, putting it to use in real time whilst Hokage, with Minato also likely obtaining Sage Mode whilst Hokage, as the name on the Toad Scroll is 4th Hokage. And while yes, it is stated that A trains in his free time according to Databook 4 when discussing a scene from chapter 416, I believe, of A lifting weights, but then with all this, all you have is Minato, who is KCM2 level in speed and faster than the Hokage, and the Raikage is getting outpaced by Oniki in these same instances and is getting outsped by KCM1 Naruto, where they could also just move relatively, but this is obviously still quite the advantage for Minato regardless of of how you want to stack it for B, as well as that he just can't even go into the full Gyuki transformation in Kumo, as that would just destroy everything. But even past that, it doesn't really matter, as Minato is able to blitz the full 9 tails, which is a superior to the 8 tails with only half of its power, along with how A was already called the unruly A in the flashback, meaning that he'd be strongest in his village, meaning stronger than the third Raikage, who fought Gyuki all the time, which would also just fit with A being greater than B, which is an argument my buddy Sage at Thickcalves brought to my attention, so shout out to him. And regardless, while B stands a better chance than all the other Jinchuriki, he doesn't have many avenues for victory. Like, for example, B can't really use sealing jutsu, such as the ink octopus that he uses on the Jinchuriki in the war, as we know that the steel shell seal, probably the strongest seal in Kumo, as Gyuki tried to break out a lot, is inferior to Minato's tetragram, which he was able to augment in his own style at the age of 15, which made Kurama include Minato alongside Hashirama's generation of those who could subdue him, being Hashirama, Mito, and Madara from what we know, which is really telling for Minato's sealing capabilities that always have just been highlighted as a strong suit for the 4th Hokage, such as how Kushina states that she taught him several sealing jutsu, or Minato being implied to be capable of sealing the full 9 tails without the Reaper Death, as Kushina doesn't even know why he was using the Reaper Death to seal it, implying there's more. And even when Minato uses the Guiding Thunder Jutsu, Choza, and more importantly Shikaku, the nation's strongest man in the Shinobi Alliance, saw the barrier and said, "It has to be Minato," implying that nobody else could perform such a high level technique and barrier, despite Orochimaru in part 1 implying that he, Hiruzen, and then Jiraiya had the highest level of sealing of their time, which is pretty crazy for Minato. Okay, so sealing's off the table for Team Kumo, and Minato might be sealing them, so what else can they do? Well, nothing really, as A doesn't really utilize any large-scale jutsu like how Darui does in the Black Lightning that he used on the White Zetsu, so A does have that ability to not waste any chakra needlessly, but he still doesn't have any way to get around Minato's speed difference, because that's how A wins fights, through speed and then brute taijutsu to follow up with, which won't be useful here. Whereas Minato's style is a really good fit against A, and one point I've neglected for Minato damaging people is actually a point highlighted more so in the Kakashi novel, but Minato could always just amplify his kunai with chakra, hence to why he was confident in going straight through the cloak with, you know, with characters like Tobirama also being confident in stabbing Madara, for example. So this is a common thing in Naruto, and why blades and weapons and Kenjutsu overall can still stay relevant throughout the series. Sasuke and B are also good examples, but back to Minato. He could always stab both of them and seal away Gyuki, as he could do that to the full 9 tails as mentioned earlier, so Minato shouldn't have much trouble in dealing with them. I also wouldn't vouch for Darui helping much either, as while he can battle Kage Summit Sasuke, and Taka Sasuke was stated to be tougher than Minato, it's presuming that it wasn't just Amaterasu, and it doesn't really matter, as that's Jonin Minato, and we've already established him getting stronger. So in conclusion, Minato wins against Kumo Gakure as well, probably like 7 to 8 out of 10 times. Next up we got Konoha, and for this one it's going to be a hypothetical Mr. Evil Minato for this one, as we're just going to plop him into Konoha that fought Pain for simplicity's sake, and low-key everyone credits Pain for him demolishing the strongest village, but Minato could also do this and just nuke wipe the nation if his goal is to take Kurama captive, especially if Minato just loosened Naruto's seal and had Kurama bomb the village, and that is a real option here. But if he did choose to run the Shinobi Gauntlet, then his best opposition would probably be Kakashi early on, who Minato would be quite relative to when he was much stronger, and relative to White Mask Obito in the war, where they can combo together against Zetsu Obito, whilst Minato was incredibly fatigued, meaning that he shouldn't have all too much trouble with, you know, Kakashi in the Pain arc, as it's not like Kamui would work or anything like that, which leaves Tsunade to fight Minato, and since Minato won't be as destructive, so, you know, to answer the question of Tsunade versus Minato, it's actually kind of weird, but not in the way you might think, as Minato would clearly be above her stat-wise, which is virtually conceded by her, along with Jiraiya stating that Minato was an unparalleled talent, with her also being stated slower than the Raikage, according to Madara, which is a Raikage that's already stated to be inferior to Minato stat-wise. So yeah, Minato is obviously above the Sannin tier fighters, and the only real argument against this would be how Orochimaru was a candidate for the 4th Hokage. However, That's all it is. He was a candidate and never got chosen, and for good reason. Hiruzen's biggest reason for being scared of Orochimaru during part 1 was him being already so strong, but his ability to master ninjutsu and hone his skills was so proficient that the decade of training would make him just unstoppable. And yet, that Hiruzen still states that Minato could beat that hyped up Giga training Orochimaru. And I mean, bro, the only people that really vouched for Orochimaru to be the 4th Hokage was like Yashiro and some other heavy Uchiha based characters who just wanted anybody but Minato to be there, because nobody really wanted Fugaku there either. So yeah, while Minato, he's definitely above Tsunade stat-wise, and while I would grant her 100 healings, it could have potentially allow for her to recover severed limbs and things along those lines. But if Minato cuts her heads off, it basically doesn't matter, which could happen very quickly into the fight, or he could just always body flicker and place a mark, so he could just butcher slash Tsunade over and over until she dies, leaving practically no opposition for Minato other than Naruto, who, let's be honest, shouldn't be beating Minato. Sage Naruto beating a KCM 2 level Minato? Probably not. But, like most things, there is always that one subset of people who gravitate towards the awfully informed opinion and take of Sage Naruto being simply stronger or a greater fighter than Minato on the basis of Fukasaku stating that he surpassed his predecessors. However, for English readers, this would be a redundant argument to make in some sense with how the Volume 45 back cover states that Naruto is stronger than his fallen sensei Jiraiya, which would cover only until the Kakashi versus Pain fight, meaning that as an English reader, and as intended by Viz to fully grasp the Naruto narrative, one would already have read this, and if you don't believe me, and believe there need to be an inner manga source, then in interpreting Fukasaku's statement, it's a bit more complicated with multiple ways of interpretation outside of he's just stronger than Minato, as this could be in terms of Sage Mode mastery or Senjutsu allocation, which is something the 4 databook makes note on in regards to the exact same page that Naruto has acquired a Sage Mode beyond Jiraiya's, which would likely apply to Minato, and Tsunade's assessment of Naruto resembling Minato and Jiraiya is really arbitrary, and to make any claims about it, especially to make a claim as outlandish as, yep, he's just stronger, seeing as only 10 chapters later, Minato states that Naruto is going to need to gain extraordinary power to beat a man. He already did. It makes this outright contradictory to this one interpretation, which isn't necessary in both pieces cited. To further this aforementioned narrative, the second databook, a guide covering up to the 5 Kage Summit, makes note about Naruto's form, where it calls it the strongest form inherited, where in the supporters comments piece, it notes how amazing it is to state that how Naruto has inherited Jiraiya's ninjutsu and techniques, which would be interesting as it attributes this form to Jiraiya, not Minato, making him a more prominent user either way. However, it simply fits within the idea of this being a fulfillment of Naruto's character in him mastering Sage Mode beyond Jiraiya, and even Minato as well, as he notes that he isn't that good at using it, which aligns with the narrative for nearly every arc in the series about Naruto surpassing Minato in one attribute. For example, in the Search for Tsunade, he masters a jutsu that Minato made. Then, the Akatsuki Suppression, he adds a nature release to the Rasengan that Minato couldn't. Then to the Pain arc, he gets a Sage Mode beyond Minato's. Then in the early war, he surpasses Jonin Minato in speed. Then later, Hokage Minato in speed. And lastly, promising to be a better Hokage than Minato once was. And while I would be open to the idea of Naruto having either a greater AP or durability than Minato, this doesn't really grant him the win due to the ridiculous speed gap, and more importantly, Naruto's tendency to just run out of Senjutsu like against Pain, which even he was able to capitalize on, meaning that Minato definitely could as well. And another thing to add to debunk a common misconception about Minato, and it's that he has power rivaling the Rasen Shuriken, which just isn't true, and the volume summary statement mentions neither Minato or the 4th Hokage, so yeah, the Rasen Shuriken is probably hitting much harder than Minato's Rasengan, but that's irrelevant to this. I just figured I'd mention it, as I can't have too much hype, but, for Konoha, Minato wins like 9 out of 10 times. Next up, I have Otagakure, the Sound Village led by Orochimaru, which houses other characters like Dosu, Zaku, Kin, Kabuto, and whatever. And let's actually just slap them together with Sunegakure, the village hidden in the sand, as they not only did battle against Konoha together in the Konoha Crush arc, but neither stand a chance alone or together. And this should be demonstrably obvious through how Orochimaru is the strongest of anybody, pressing him in this group. And we've already discussed what an awful matchup that is, meaning that Minato can beat up the strongest soldier on their team, and Deidara alone already conquered Tsurigakure, so saying that Minato, the man who had a run-on-side order from Deidara's village, shouldn't sound crazy. Any large-scale sand attacks would also just get countered. Shukaku obviously isn't as strong as Kurama, which makes it worse when considering whether it's the 3rd, 4th, or 5th Kazekage. Minato is stated to be praised among all ninja, including the elites of the other villages, as the greatest in godlike speed. So yeah, you get the point. This fight is an absolute stomp in Minato's favor. No need to really get into it, and he should win this probably 10 out of 10 times, albeit maybe a little harder than the Mist Village. But anyway, what did you guys think? Do you guys believe that Minato is actually that guy, or maybe you disagree and believe that he loses to one of the villages, or whatever you do believe? Please let me know as to why in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button and just consider checking out more of my content, as it helps me out a ton and allows for more content for you guys to be made. And as always, and most importantly, God bless you all. Love you guys.